I'm part of the National Sierra Club. It's a longtime environmental organization based in volunteers, and I'm the local San Antonio area chair of the group right now. And we have been involved for many years in trying to improve our local environment. Focusing in recent years on climate change and the local utilities, CPS Energy and its coal plants, its related pollution from that, and our high level of local asthma, and our impact on climate change.
So tell me a little bit more then about the petition that y'all are organizing around CPS. How did that come about, and what is it trying to accomplish?
Okay, so this petition is the result of frustration, I guess I would say, on the part of the variety of community groups that have been working with CPS for a number of years to try to get more climate justice and social justice in our community, improve our air quality, shut down our coal plants, and address our climate change impacts. So despite these years of collaborative effort with CPS, we feel like we've not made sufficient progress in a sufficiently rapid manner, and that we've been stonewalled on a lot of fronts, and continue to be stonewalled on a lot of fronts, and that the pace of change, as we've seen from all of this national and international studies, is just not adequate, that we are really in the decade now of accountability, the decade of responsibility to address climate change seriously. The previous decades of denial have got us to this critical tipping point, and we can no longer wait for further denial and slow business as usual action, that we have to move forward and move forward rapidly to address these things for the sake of our local families, our local future of our children, and for the sake of the whole world.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, if you could, Terry. I mean, one of the reasons we invited you on particularly is because I know you were involved in putting together the language of the petition, and I'm wondering if you could walk folks through, kind of point to point, the key things that this petition would do, assuming you get on the ballot and the ballot measure passes. What would it require of the city?
CPS specifically, and again, I have to clarify, we have two petitions actually, one related to SAWS and one to CPS. So the one related to CPS has a number of points, and the first point is to completely reorganize the utility. It is currently run by a board of trustees, which is independent from the city in most measures and is self-perpetuating. That means they appoint themselves for new positions, new replacements, and the city council approves those appointments virtually always. This structure goes way back to the 1940s and the 50s, in the era of redlining and racial discrimination, and it's a way of preserving inequity in our city in many respects. And so we think that the Austin model is better, where CPS would actually function as a department of the city. It would be accountable directly to the city council and mayor, and this would give citizens a direct input which we don't have currently. It wasn't until last year that we were even able to give testimony to the board of trustees, make public comments directly to them. So the pace of change and the acceptance of public input has been minimal, and this would change that. The objections about the council already being too busy and we don't think is appropriate. They already run a multi-billion-dollar organization, and CPS would be an additional component to that, and they would have advisory commission set up on the basis of this charter amendment that would have the expertise and broad public representation to provide that input on the full gamut of their policies, not just on the rates they charge, but on everything, including energy generation policies, climate change, etc.
So a key, it sounds like, number one, we're moving the governance structure of utility away from this exclusive kind of internal little occult board to the city council, to a committee that would be answerable to council to do that technical work. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And in addition to that, I think there's a couple other key elements on there. I mean, I know when people say, oh, well, council is no better than the CPS board, it's not going to change anything. Well, you have some very particular changes that would be required, right?
Yeah, that's right. The current board currently has people that their only qualification basically is to be a business person and be liked by the current people on the board. They have no requirement to know anything about energy, to know anything about climate change, equity, social justice, rate structures, etc. So the advisory commission would allow much more of that input. Other changes that we would have here is related to the management of CPS itself. The same management would continue except for the current CEO or director of CPS. That position now currently accountable only to the Board of Trustees would be accountable to the city manager and the city council, and their compensation would be set annually by the city council. Currently, the Board of Trustees, last year, the Board of Trustees rewarded this CEO $930,000, almost $1 million, and that's really out of line with us being one of the poorest big cities in the country. Los Angeles, the CEO that runs both utilities, SAWS and CPS, essentially, water and electricity, made about $500,000. And Los Angeles is a bigger, wealthier city. So these boards are not looking out for their ratepayers. They're not taking their fiduciary responsibilities seriously. They are protecting the powers that be.
And then there's something in there too about the coal plant, isn't there?
Yes, thank you. There's important language about energy policies which now are largely outside of cities' at least active control. This charter amendment would require that the coal plants be closed by 2030. That's really a critical component of the city's climate action and to get us near fossil fuel neutrality and divestment entirely by 2040.
And then what would you need to be successful in this petition? Like, how many signatures are y'all trying to get? By what date? And then when would it actually go to the ballot if you were successful?
Before I answer that, can I just add a couple more things about the actual energy policy impacts of the charter proposal? Two things I haven't mentioned specifically, I think, is this would require a citizens rate advisory committee to be structured to, it would require citizen input so that citizens, the rates would be structured in a more progressive manner so that higher users would pay more rather than our regressive rate structures right now that are burdensome to the many less advantaged parts of our community. I think that's an important change, and people that face termination and unaffordable bills would be positively impacted by all of this. The other thing is energy efficiency goals and programs like the flex step and things, weatherization and those things would be have a potential to be greatly expanded by being built in to incentivization in the rate structures and things. In terms of what we need as a to be successful, the first part of this is to get this on the spring ballot in May of 2021. That's when the city council elections take place, city council and mayor. Mm-hmm. And we need 20,000 signatures on this charter amendment petition mm-hmm. To get this on the spring ballot. And then when it's on the spring ballot, if we get those signatures, then everybody will have to address these issues much more publicly.
Mm-hmm. And so is there a deadline before the May election, or can you keep collecting signatures up until that election?
No, this has to, in order to get on the ballot, it has to be turned into the city clerk in January for verification of the signatures, mm-hmm. And then to be on the designated official ballot by mid-February, I believe it is. I don't remember the exact date.
Okay. So you're looking at about 3 months of collecting signatures?
Yeah, there's an official 180 time period for this. We're hoping to finish up before the end of the year. Yeah.
Okay.
What has been the reaction from the utility, from the city, and I was going to ask you about the media, but I think you kind of responded to that. I feel like some of the first columns that came out of the Express News, or at the Rivard or at the San Antonio Report, there was a chief of staff for Mayor Nierenberg that came out and said, it's about raw power, I think, or something. He accused you guys of just being lusting for power. And then the business editor at the Express News was very dismissive. I feel like you kind of responded to that. The suggestion I took away from those writers was that, this petition doesn't care where it leaves everyday working San Antonians, that it's just about coal, it's about power of the quote-unquote environmental community. I welcome you to respond to that accusation, I guess. But I'm also really curious about what your relationship, how this has changed, either within CPS for you, for the organizations that are working with you, or with council and the mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a broad question. I think clearly the feedback we've received directly and indirectly has been that the mayor and CPS are very upset and somewhat threatened, I think it's fair to say, by this movement on our part, and they're not happy about it, not comfortable about it. I think in terms of the media, some of those arguments were expressed in the media that this is what you said, misguided. It's about power. It's only about some narrow environmental focus. In fact, it is about power in some sense, because currently our utilities and historically have been run by the business community, as they call themselves, for
Right.
far too long. Very large, powerful corporations, families, vested interests that really benefit from cheap, discounted electricity and also cheap, discounted water. And this would definitely provide more equity and input, equity to lower income parts of our community and input to a broader spectrum of our community. Because although, like one of those articles said, city council can be pressured by the public. Well, that's exactly right.
Right.
That's an important part of this effort, because the boards basically, it's not like they're not pressured by anybody. They're pressured by the biggest, most powerful groups in the city. They hear from them directly and by picking up a personal phone call. We don't have that kind of access. And this would change that. So we think that's a good thing. The voters may decide otherwise, but if it gets on the ballot, then it will provoke real discussion. And we think democracy and public discussion and local referendum type input is a good thing in our society.
Mm-hmm. Terry, we didn't include this question in our what we emailed to you, but I was just thinking as you were talking in response to Greg's question about how has the city responded, how have people responded as you've been collecting these signatures? How have residents been responding to the effort to open up CPS to more direct accountability by the community?
Yeah, I've been out collecting both the CPS signatures, and I mentioned again, there is a somewhat different coalition of groups working on more accountability for SAWS, our water utility, as well. And both petitions seek to bring more public input and accountability. And when I talk to people, 90% of people are happy to sign on to both of these, to get both of these on the ballot in the spring, and to address the exorbitant CEO compensation at both utilities in the context of our city. Again, on the SAWS side, Mr. Puente said that the limitations that petition would impose would be a hardship on senior staff in SAWS. And the limitations in that petition are similar to the ones that happened with the city manager in the last couple of years. So again, one way to address those supposed limitations is simply to raise the minimum salaries of people working for SAWS.
Are you talking about, so the CEO or senior staff would have their salaries capped at a certain amount over the lowest paid employee? Is that in both of the petitions?
No, that's in the SAWS petition.
Right.
The CPS petition, it leaves it up to the city council to set a salary annually for the CEO of or the manager of CPS. So they're a little different, but
yeah. So the last question, I guess, is, I mean, you've covered a lot of territory, and I appreciate your time in doing so. If you've got what's the elevator pitch, right? You've got 1 minute. You're can't say trapped. You're going floor 1 to floor 2. What is the one thing that you would bring forward first that you feel like finds almost universal support that's contained within this effort with CPS?
We're trying to put the public back in our public utilities, make them more accountable to the public, not use legal loopholes to build pipelines without city approval, cut the overpaid CEO salaries, get public input to our local rate structures to make them more equitable, and to address climate change and our coal plant problems here directly.
Terry, if you can just close out by letting people know how they can get involved and what specific kinds of support you need for this effort. Is it, beyond just signing the petition, obviously, do you need people to collect signatures? Do you need donations of PPE or money or water? Or just tell us a little more about how people can get more deeply involved.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely, we need volunteers at the early polling sites. Right now, that's the biggest, most urgent need because early voting starts tomorrow, Tuesday, and we want to have people out there. That's a great opportunity to collect a lot of signatures. We need San Antonio registered voters to sign, so it's a great opportunity to find them. But there are like 50 polling sites, many hours to cover. And so we need the volunteers. We're making it as safe as possible with the COVID crisis we're dealing with. But I've been doing it. I think I can do it safely. And there's a sawsact.org website and a Recall CPS.com website where you can get more information. You can sign up to volunteer, and that'd be the most important thing. You could also download both petitions at those websites. They do have to be printed out and physically signed. We're not allowed to do online collection, unfortunately. Thanks.
That's fantastic. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to address?
I just urge everybody to help because I think this really will make a positive change to the city. A lot of the old powers in town are feeling kind of threatened about this. And I'm okay with that. If we fail, we'll go back in other ways to move forward. But I think this is a real opportunity for our city to become more diverse, more accountable, more equitable, and address climate change more justly and openly and effectively.